We want to help innovators in undergraduate STEM education increase the impact of their work.
Improving undergraduate STEM education is increasingly important for our country's future economic development and workforce needs.
And a lot of really great research has been done by dedicated college faculty to develop instructional strategies and materials to improve undergraduate STEM education.
And these new strategies and materials that people are developing can be shown to improve all student learning, but have a greater effect on women and underrepresented minorities.
Unfortunately, most STEM faculty don't really use these new strategies and materials.
This is a problem that funding agencies are increasingly concerned with.
The early work that the NSF funded that led to so many of the really good classroom improvements, particular pedagogies, and the quality of evidence that those pedagogies are effective, that was all done while we all collectively bought into a model of dissemination that was analogous to the way bench science spreads. If someone in chemistry publishes a method that's clearly better than the older method, of course people adopt the new method. But that turned out not to be the case in education. That was a long, slow learning curve to realize that publication and even running workshops was not going to be enough to bring about systematic adoption of better pedagogies. And if you look at the way solicitations changed and moving forward to the current IU solicitation, you see increasingly explicit the expectation that people need to draw on what's known about organizational change and have actual proactive plans for how to bring about widespread adoption, rather than depending on the old model of spontaneous adoption just because the data showed that a method is better.
So what can education developers do to have a greater impact?
Our project team has looked at what successful developers do and contrasted this with what typical practice looks like. And from this, we have suggestions on what developers can do differently.
And we have a framework for developing education projects with propagation in mind.
So the first step in the designing for sustained adoption process is understanding your product. You know that you've understood your product when you can articulate the critical features and when you can describe what's required for a typical user, what types of changes they need to make in order to use your product.
After developers have a better understanding of their product, the next step is to develop detailed portraits of potential adopters. This information might include the types of institutions, disciplines, class sizes, factors that would encourage adoption and lead people to want to use the product, or concerns that adopters might have about using the product.
Continuing thinking about the institutions where adopters would live is part of where we talk about understanding the system. So understanding beyond just the individual to their department in which they work and what are the disciplinary norms that would influence any changes people would make to their teaching practice, as well as the institutional culture and even extra institutional factors such as accrediting agencies that can influence people's decisions to change their teaching practice.
So now that you've identified the instructional system, you know what the gap is between the current instructional system and the desired instructional system. The next thing you want to do is to bridge that gap. We think about that in terms of three processes. The first one is interactive development. And in interactive development, we contrast this to typical development. In typical development, what people do is they develop a polished product, they put it out in the marketplace, and they find that people usually don't adopt it. There's some mismatch between their product and what people are interested in using. What we recommend for interactive development is starting very early and interacting with potential adopters to find out what are their interests, skills, needs of an instructional product, and then designing something that keeps the core features that you want to have, but also matches the surface features of their situation.
Journal papers and conference presentations are what are commonly used to spread the word about product, and these do raise awareness of the product, but they rarely promote adoption. Instead, to get adoption, developers need to engage potential adopters, and here developers often raise questions about what to do. That's why we've developed a whole list of strategies ranging from not very engaging to very engaging, and developers can pick from these different strategies to develop a plan that's appropriate for their product and for the degree of change that's envisioned.
So if you've done an effective job of interactive dissemination, then you'll have people who are ready to try out your product. And you'll find that both new and experienced adopters will need additional support to optimize their implementation. This is where your interactive development is important because you'll have identified what types of support people are going to need and be prepared to provide it. Obviously, the developers themselves can provide support, but if you think about other external resources that can support adopters, this will be important, particularly if you expect your innovation to be around for a long time.
If you want to learn more, check out our website at increasetheimpact.com, where we have a lot of resources for education developers.
For example, we have a how-to guide that will not only help you think about your product in more detail, but will guide you through the process of developing a propagation plan. And we have an assessment instrument that you can use to help evaluate your grant proposals.
And be sure to sign up for our mailing list where you can hear about upcoming workshop opportunities.
And get updates.